Rituals are important for many people. We saw that just during the weekend when the funeral of the Pope, Pope Francis, the funeral happened, and many people, billions of people, watched it. However, the handling of rituals is not often done very well in organizations. And just recently, I received quite a number of emails from people who asked me to speak about that topic. I pushed it back a bit. However, when I now see how bad things have become, and especially one case I'm going to give you in a minute, is, in my opinion, extremely unacceptable and extremely shocking. And even more shocking is that leaders were surprised how the outcome of all of their actions were. So we're going to talk about how important are rituals in your organizations. So when we talk about rituals, we have to see different dimensions, and of course, we have to focus on certain dimensions. And we focus on the meaning of rituals in leadership, HR, and recruiting today. Talking about rituals, I just give you, because of course you might now ask, is this really important? I'm talking about real world business cases. Every single case I give you right now is not older than 6 months, and the first one is a case with HR. Just imagine you're sitting in your HR office and someone calls you and says, "Hey, look, we have a really stressful time at the moment in our project. I really don't want to be a burden to my leader. However, my uncle died and I need to have 3 days off. 3 days of simply paid time off due to extraordinary circumstances." That email was passed on to HR, and the answer, which was given to someone where I, to someone I had a phone call with, because he told me this is what happened, and I said, "Look, I really can't believe this happened until you sent me the proof, because that is just too absurd." And he forwarded me the email. Of course, I keep everything confidential which I receive. And the email said, and again, in writing, it said, "Private matters have to be organized by yourself. Stressful time in the organization, the economy is tight. It's not a reason to have time off." Just let that sink in. So one of your relative dies, and then, by the way, the email goes on and they classify when you would get time off. So, for example, when your siblings die, or your children, or your parents, that's okay, then you get time off. However, not aunt and uncle, because they are a bit more distant relatives. So there's a classification of which death is acceptable for a time off and which one is not. Not even taking into account what your relationship with that person is. When you do not have any relationship to that person, you probably wouldn't ask for time off. And that is only case number one. The second case is, and it's happened in recruiting, the second case is someone applies in your business to work with you, and you openly communicate, which is, by the way, good, that you talk to different candidates. You say, "Hey, we limit it down to 8 candidates so far. You are one of these 8 candidates we're talking about." And by the way, there is no shame in talking openly about we talk to multiple candidates as long as it's factually true. And then they send you an email where they say, "Hey, on that Wednesday, please, shortly before noon, Wednesday, 11 a.m., please be online here, and then we're going to do the next round of interviewing." And then the answer, which was written in perfectly polite and reasonable words, said, "Look, it's the first day of my child going to school. There's an introductory session, there's a bit of festivities, a bit of a small party. I'm going to meet the other parents and everything." It is basically it's basically a rite of initiation into school and education life for this child. Could I please have another time? Could I please have another time slot? Because you talk to different people, maybe we can just switch things around. And he even offered different time slots. The answer of that business was, "Well, we have a certain process here, and we are very busy." It was a larger organization. "We are very busy here, so processes are streamlined. So we are not going to talk to other candidates if they can shuffle around times. Please be available at that time." They were unwilling to move a single minute to a candidate they potentially wanted to hire, due to that person dared to want to see their child's first school day. And by the way, just to let you know, I do not have family. I do not have children. So it's not a family father talking to you here. And when we see this, you probably now wonder, how did this continue? And the story continued, of course. The person dropped out of the race. He said, "Thank you very much. I see this as a communication of values, and I hereby revoke my application." Going straight from there to Kununu, that's the German version of Glassdoor, and Glassdoor, so on both platforms. He went on both platforms and wrote a, let's say, very straightforward, and I really mean very straightforward, review of the recruiting process. And then suddenly the organization was deeply offended about how you can call this a process you're not happy with. And of course, someone has the right to give their feedback. And by the way, that is not all of it. That is not all of it. When we talk about leadership, the area of leadership, in one bank in Frankfurt, we had a certain case where also for a long time people were denied time off for any kind of family circumstances. And very interestingly, a new leader appeared and said, on a certain day, it happened in Germany just last year, and the leader said, look, you all have client appointments out of the office on the same day on that particular day. And then the leader said, look, I don't know what you do, but I have the Martinsumzug, which is a traditional walk with small lights and children, families walk through town. It's a very traditional thing. It exists in the Frankfurt area, not in northern Germany, so someone had to explain to me what it is. And the Martinsumzug, that leader said, is more important to him than work. So he just took time off. So he's not in the office because he has Martinsumzug. And all the other leaders were very silent suddenly. And then the senior leader said, look, do you really have client appointments? And any other leader suddenly said, no, we just put client appointments in the calendar because the years before when we said we want to go with our families to the Martinsumzug, people said, look, you work in banking, that private stuff has to step back when you want to have a career in banking. And of course, that is factually not correct. At least not when you want to take care of rituals, because rituals have different meanings. And we have to talk about what are the meanings of these rituals. The first one is the factual level. And the factual level is the one that often leaders stick to. I give you an example here. When someone says, hey, I have a family bereavement, you can, of course, say, well, from a legal point of view, there's no law forcing us to give you time off. Yeah, that's factually correct. Factually, it's correct that no one can force you to give time off. However, there is more than just the factual level. By the way, you can be factually completely correct and still fail as a leader. It doesn't mean that you ignore the facts. It doesn't mean that you put emotions over facts. However, besides the factual level, there is, of course, another dimension which has a consequence in the future relationship with that person you're talking to, and that is the emotional level. When we look into studies from Professor Neely, Harvard University. So when we look into her studies, she published a lot on trust. And there's not just one trust. There are two different kinds of trust. One of the trusts is the so-called cognitive swift trust. It is a trust you gain very quickly. So, for example, when someone starts in your office as a new person working in your office and you just get the name John Smith or Martha Miller, whoever else, some person starts in your office, person X starts to work there. As soon as you have the name, you usually go on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, whatever platform, you take whatever it takes. You're basically better than the FBI, CIA, MI6. You basically want to know everything about that person because you want to see, well, hopefully they have experience or they come from our industry, or maybe I know them or have mutual contacts. Maybe it's a nice person I already know and they now start here. So you try to gain some trust. And very important here for leaders, you have to introduce people properly, especially when you hire people from outside the industry, where very quickly a whole department can come to the conclusion and say, oh God, no, not again, someone with no experience. We really only hire the losers, don't we? And that person already has lost the trust before they entered the office on day one. So the emotional side of ritual is not about the cognitive swift trust, because quick trust we always gain, because otherwise we can't work together. The other trust, the second trust we have, according to Professor Neely, Harvard University, is the so-called ET, the emotional trust. The emotional trust can only be gained in times of crisis. It doesn't take much to be a good leader in times where everything goes well. And as soon as someone tells me, oh, even in good times you have to do a lot of work, yes, you have to do lots of admin and you have to file all the papers and you probably have to justify why you have that many people on staff and you have to do the appraisal interviews and file the interviews in writing and do the transcript and whatnot. All of that is valid and reliable work. However, it's not the work that makes you a leader. If you're a good leader, we see in times of crisis. And in times of crisis, we see if you're able to deal with situations properly. As soon as the crisis arises and someone says, now I can see if a leader supports me, and someone says, look, I have a family bereavement, or my child has their first day at school and the initiation at school, can I have a day off? And the leader says, nope. People say, okay. It's a so-called moment of truth. Moment of truth does not necessarily mean people aggressively have a go against you. Moment of truth does not necessarily mean that people yell at you or tell you how bad of a leader you are. It might be that people say, oh, okay, what a pity. They turn around and their trust is gone. As soon as you do well in the moment of truth, the curve of trust immediately goes up, and it stays up for a long time, especially when you do well multiple times during times of crisis. However, when you do not do too well in times of crisis, then the curve goes down. It goes up way later, if at all. It is possible that you ruined the relationship and the trust relationship with that person until the end of all days. I can tell you that one leader in one company, and that happened in Milton Keynes in the UK. Someone said, I really have to go to the hospital. I just received a call. My daughter collapsed at school and is now in the hospital. I have to leave immediately. And that leader told that person working there, your daughter isn't recover any quicker when you stand beside her bed. Don't expect, I do not have family. I do not have children. And even I wouldn't do anything near that, not even in my youngest years as a leader. So as soon as you ruin a trust relationship, you shouldn't be surprised that people do not consider you a leader. People think you are a department administrator doing whatever it takes to get away with the least amount of work possible, putting as much on other people's table as you probably can. So the emotional aspect of it, of the ritual, always needs to be considered, because the emotional aspect has a massive impact on the trust of the people. And the third one is the personal aspect. I'll give you a very simple example here. Probably you work in an industry where you say, well, many people know each other in the industry. And that's probably the case in almost any industry. Surprise, surprise, I know other consultants, I know other trainers, I know other coaches or speakers or mentors because I work in the industry. And in industries, you meet people sooner or later, and then you know each other in due course of the years, because you meet in different project circumstances during expos and events, and then you get to know people. However, where now people sit together and they do not trust you. They had a couple of bad experiences, but they say, well, I have a great team here. Our leader's really bad, but we don't have much contact with him or her or that person. So I just float along. It's nice to work with anyone here. Payment is okay. It's not far to drive or walk. So it's a good trade-off overall. And suddenly people sit together at the dinner, somewhere at the local football club, sports club, or anywhere, social clubs in general, and someone says, oh, mate, I think you work in engineering, don't you? Um, I, with my employer, we just had a merger and it's not going too well. I'm actually looking for new work. Do you think that you can put in a nice word for me and I might apply for a position in your organization? The answer will then be, look, mate, you have 2 children, and I know that you probably saw our job ad about how family friendly we are. It's all lies. It's all lies. It's just marketing. Marketing posted on the wall. There's nothing for families in there. It's just straightforward lies. Our leaders don't live up to any values. The only values they have is cash in and leave. And that will make the round very quickly, not only at that table, but in your whole social circumstance. And by the way, with social media, it all goes way quicker than you could ever think of. So from the factual level to the emotional level to the personal level, rituals have a meaning. And you have to see that you need to take care of them. The question is, how can we now do it better? How can we do it better that in your organization, leaders do it better? So step number 1 is you need to create awareness. And creating awareness can be done by mentorships. It can be done by information being sent around, can be training, coaching, consulting, whatever else. There are many different approaches, but you need to create the awareness. It's not going to come by itself. And I just give you myself as an example. When I come from a family of public servants, I worked my way with very hard work into free enterprise. And especially when I was a manager at my young age, in my early or mid-20s, I was not the one who had lots of understanding for any kind of private circumstances. Fortunately, I didn't have many situations, but I always told people, look, I get my private life sorted, so why don't you get your private life sorted? I don't have to take time off because something in my private life happened. And back in the days, I didn't divorce, but I broke up with my boyfriend. We had an apartment together, so it was a lot of work outside of the working hours, but I just could somehow handle it. Well, maybe others can't. And there can be different reasons for that. You need to have an understanding. And fortunately, I had a great mentor who told me about that, so I could grow with that mentorship. Very important is creating awareness happens in 2 different ways. Either it's under certain conduct with professional approaches, and then you can avoid many mistakes, or you do learning by doing. Learning by doing has two massive disadvantages. Number one, you do lots of errors and you harm the organization massively. And number two is when you do something wrong, you still don't know how to do it right. When someone asks for a day off for reason XYZ and you think, oh, there are 10 different answers now, I pick this one. And then you get an angry response. So you think, okay, that one was wrong. So I still have 9 other options for the next time. Hopefully a bit more lucky next time. So you see, the personal awareness is extremely important here. Extremely important. And when it comes to rituals, one aspect has to be named, and that is there cannot be any self-referential leadership. Self-referential leadership means that people start to talk to you the following. Let's say you want to have half a day off due to personal circumstances which are beyond your control. And suddenly people start to talk to you in that way, saying, look, Mr. Brabandt, when I was your age, when I was a young manager here, I didn't take time off when this happened and that happened. And I just figured it out by myself. And, I would strongly recommend to you, if you want to get to my position, I can tell you with your behavior, you will never get to my position. And the right answer to that would be, when I see your behavior right now, I probably do not want to end up being someone like you right now. And probably I do not want to end up in the position where you are right now, because when you say it didn't harm you, looking at you right now, I think it harmed you mentally and psychologically quite massively, and as a leader even more. Self-referential leadership means someone says, I have done it that way, and you have to do it exactly the same way. And that is straightforward wrong, especially when there are leaders who say, my junior leadership experience are 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. And sometimes you simply have to adapt. I can tell you, in my first leadership experiences now are 20 years ago, and I can tell you that certain developments in society I have a very different personal view on, especially when people tell me, oh, I want to work 4 days a week, 30 hours a week, but have a full salary and a great pension from the age of 55. I am strongly opposed to it. However, I do not communicate that in that way because as a leader, I adapt to social circumstances. You have to adapt to the people who work for you, not vice versa. You adapt to them, not they adapt to you. It doesn't mean that you have to sign off everything they say. However, when you simply hold outdated views because you said that brought me to where I am right now, that is not a sustainable position in any leadership circumstance. So be aware that non-self-referential leadership is common practice, and there is no self-referential leadership around anywhere, because simply telling people, I did it that way back then the circumstances were so different that anything you did back then probably is neither valid nor reliable today. And on top of all of that, there must be a zero tolerance practice towards any kind of offense against the awareness. And I give you an example that I had to go through, not by myself, but I saw with a colleague in an organization where I worked. I worked for one American organization, and one of the location owners, a franchise owner, said we had one massive ritual every year. We had the annual convention in the US, and that was the event. It was lots of hard work, often workshops starting very early, 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. in the morning, going quite late. And then, of course, you had all the parties. You saw all the areas in the US, traveled to the greatest cities from San Diego, Las Vegas, New York City, Washington. You saw the whole world. It was the event. You were completely exhausted after these 3, 4, 5 days. Usually you arrived a bit early and stayed a bit longer and saw the US a bit. However, it was highly motivating. It really motivated me for the whole of the next year because I wanted to be there again. Because the rule was you only went to the conference when you were amongst the best trainers. I was, a couple of other colleagues were, and one female colleague, the first female trainer entering the top 10 ranking from a European position, got into that ranking and didn't go to the US with us. And when I asked that location leader, why didn't you take her with you? He said, well, she corrected me during meetings with clients. She made me feel stupid, so I'm not taking her with me. I just don't like her. And that is just arbitrary behavior. That is the definition of bad leadership. When you say, hey, I'm referring to myself and my hurt ego. And by the way, I remember these meetings where this happened. And of course, we can now discuss, do you need to correct people when the client is in the room? But in this situation, the leader said something which is factually so wrong that it had to be corrected, because otherwise it would give us really bad looks in the project. And also, she corrected him in a really nice way. It wasn't offensive. It wasn't a loss of face. Client appreciated that, and we just moved on. So I didn't even think this is a thing for him. But for him, it was obviously a hurt ego. And as a consequence, there was the consequence for her. She didn't go to the conference. And when I then went one level up and said, how can this leadership be tolerated? The answer was, it's a really senior leader, very difficult. And, in franchise, we can't really do much. Immediately, excuses happened. And it didn't even take a year until I left that organization, and I worked there as a freelance consultant, and I decided to work somewhere else. So you see that when you do not have a zero tolerance policy against offending the awareness, people very quickly will see, oh, okay, it's still arbitrary. So there is one rule for the others and one rule for the leaders. And that is, of course, neither sustainable nor acceptable. Create the awareness, then be sure there is non-self-referential professional leadership in place, which people learn with professional approaches, and then practice a zero-tolerance approach towards any kind of offenses. And then dealing with rituals in your organization will be done a lot better. And I wish you all the best doing so. And when you now say, hey, there are quite a number of things I still like to discuss, happy to do so. So first, when you are listening to this on YouTube, because we have the podcast option, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And besides that, we now have the video cast where you also see everything visual. We have a bit of the pictures, etc. So feel free to go on our YouTube channel, leave a like there, subscribe to the channel. And please leave a comment if you like. Also, when you have topics you'd like to talk about, please put it in the comment on YouTube. When you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and you liked it, please leave a 5-star review. Thank you very much for that. And please recommend the YouTube channel or my podcast amongst your colleagues, friends. Put it on social media, LinkedIn, wherever you like. Thank you very much for that. Big news here. On YouTube, we're not only slowly but steadily growing, we now also do YouTube Shorts. YouTube Shorts are short clips, and we do them every day, where you get leadership tips. And leadership tips are not general ones. I'm always referring to actual things happening right now. So I take the daily news, analyze the leadership aspect of it, and give you tips on how to do either something very well as it was done, or how to do things better when something was not done too well. So be sure to join us on YouTube, because there's a lot more content on there than we have on our podcast channel right now. Also, that's an announcement here, on YouTube we will have additional videos, so more than just the weekly one. So stay tuned and subscribe, maybe put the alarm bell there so you don't miss out on any kind of videos. And of course, feel free to follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. Also, feel free to go on my on my website, where you see all the articles I publish on the matter. And when you now say, by the way, my website is nb-networks.biz. I also, of course, link this in the comments here in the comment section, and also put it into the show notes of the podcast. When you now say, hey, oh, by the way, the transcript we always had on my website, that transcript is going to move to YouTube. So be sure that when you want to read the transcript, go on YouTube, because YouTube always gives you a transcript with the video. So feel free to go there and see everything you want to see. If you now say, hey, I'd like to discuss something, but I don't want to put it in public, I don't want to put a public comment there, I really want to discuss something in private, feel free to do so and send me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. Send me an email, and then we just take it from there. If you now say, and by the way, if you just want to discuss something, happy to do so. If you want something very specific, for example, you need a training, a workshop, coaching, mentoring, you need a speaker for your conference, just let me know as well. I'm available for that, of course, as well. And when you now say, hey, do you have live sessions? Yes, we have live sessions. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, that's our leadership letter. Every Wednesday morning, I send out the leadership letter, where you have articles, podcast, videocast, and daytime plus login for the live sessions we have. We only communicate that via the leadership letter, so be sure to sign up there. Very important here, it's 100% content. It's there is an ad-free guarantee. There is no advertising on there. I'm not selling anything to you there. It's just content. However, the most important part of all of this, what we do right here, is apply what you heard in this podcast. because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive changes that you obviously want to see in your organization. And I wish you all the best doing so. Thank you very much for your time.